start us off.
All right. Welcome to MS Office Hours. It is Thursday, May 11th, and I hope you're prepared for your Azure crossover event of the year. Let me introduce our hosts.
All right, everybody, I'm Heather Cox. With me today are...
I'm Andrea Sangrio.
And I think somewhere in the ether is Garrett Chandler. He's been listening in and chatting with us, but we are super excited to have our friends who do Azure Office Hours come and join us. We thought it would be really, really cool for those of you who don't get to attend their office hours to see what they do over there and have them come over here to our MS Office Hours. So, gentlemen, we will turn the show over to you, and we'll come back on camera around 5 o'clock Eastern time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Really appreciate the opportunity to do the first ever crossover event. We have a topic that we sold for you guys that you guys were very excited about, which is OpenAI and ChatGPT in Azure. And so before we jump into that topic, I do want to make sure that we clarify a little bit about where we're coming from. Like, what is this other thing that we're coming from? So if you're not aware, the Azure for Education community has been around for 6+ years now. I think we're doing episode 267 coming up this tomorrow. Every Friday, we've been doing a call for 6+ years. Similar to this call, a little more scripted, perhaps. The entire call is recorded. We've grown to the point where we're averaging this year 245 customers on every Friday call. So it's a little more rigid, right? So questions are in IM, it's recorded. And what we do is we provide, Azure updates, what changed this week in Azure you need to know about. And there's something every week to keep us busy there. David covers our learning opportunities. We cover the upcoming schedule, and we'll dive, similar to you guys, into a topic of the week in the back half. And that topic of the week is generated by customer interest. We have several customers that share their awesome epic stuff they built in Azure. And we have product group managers, all kinds of people, right, from all over Microsoft, as well as our colleagues do stuff. So that's what started this whole thing. And then the pandemic hit. And we realized, holy cow, we're not flying all over the country anymore. How do we connect with our customers? And the first topic that everybody's hair was on fire was VDI. Oh my God, we need VDI. And so we started office hours for VDI. And then that parlayed into multiple different other office hours. So what started out as a Friday call actually now has calls on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays every single week for those that are data and AI, as virtual desktop, as we talked about, app dev and DevOps, Azure for research, and even security. So a whole lot of stuff, US and Canadian. About 2.5 years ago, our Azure friends from Microsoft Canada found out about our call and said, hey, can we bring our people in? We said, sure, as long as you have your Canadian customers present. And they came through. We've got 3 or 4 presentations from Canadian customers on cool stuff they built. So it's a big kumbaya. So it's, that's what we do in that community. And so just want to orient you guys a little bit about what that is. You got the links there. There is a video explaining the community from my colleague, Eric. So Eric, David, and I kind of started this. And the rest of our colleagues contribute to this with the various office hours and presenting, et cetera. So it's really great because everybody gets a chance to participate. Now, one of the things we do is we'll do deep dives that are typically 90 minutes or maybe even 2 hours on topics that really interest customers that they want to get into based on customer demand. So we did April 25th, I think we did our Zero to Hero with Azure OpenAI, which is a superset of what we're going to talk about here today. And we had 500+ customers attend that. That was a big, big event. A tremendous participation, lots of great Q&A. And we actually did a part 2 on Tuesday of this week. Our nav is still recovering from that. And we had a whole bunch more customers get into operationalizing. How do you actually put this into production? So we're going to tease you guys with a little bit of the content, but if you want more of the details, you can grab the recording there. Now, if you're clicking that link and going, wait a minute, I can't get to it. Well, we have our content posted behind the velvet rope of a Teams team. So you guys all know what that is. And so we have a join process. Again, we don't want vendors sneaking in and collecting PII. So we actually manually vet everybody, and MSIT doesn't let us hit the APIs that add people automatically to Teams groups. So we have to do that manually. So just be aware, it can take us 2 or 3 days because we have day jobs to join you in. But we have 2,550 customers in our team. And so welcome to join and get all the content that we post. All of our recordings, slide deck material, best practices, the various office hours. Our NAB's always recording really cool stuff and posting that as well. So whole community just like this one around Azure. All right, that's kind of the crossover part, right? Now, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to talk about the AI big picture. We're going to help you get started with Azure OpenAI, kind of explain the difference between like AI, OpenAI.com and Azure OpenAI. Our NAB's going to show you the OpenAI Studio, which is really, really cool, and some integration with low-code solution scenarios. Arindam is going to help us with. And then data privacy and security and why you kind of want to watch that around these AI technologies. And then if we have time, we'll get to fast track. I'm not sure we'll have time, but you can see I'm using my auctioneer cadence so we can try to get there. So this is me, and I'll talk to you about the big picture. So basically, this is about accelerating over time, right? So AI debuted back in 1956. And if you think about it, quite a bit of time went by before we got our first machine learning models. And then, it took quite a while to get into deep learning, those language, deep language neural networks that we have that are powering our IVR systems and all this stuff is a fairly recent development. And the most recent wave that is just causing a huge amount of press, good, bad, and different, is around generative AI. And that's what OpenAI and ChatGPT are focused on, is generative AI. And that's what we'll be talking about during this session. Now, I want to make sure that we understand that OpenAI is a separate organization that Microsoft has certainly made an investment in, but it is a separate organization. And Microsoft has, a mission, and OpenAI has a mission, and they're pretty well aligned. But I want to clarify that Microsoft has access to OpenAI's various models via a licensing agreement. So we have the ability to provide for you the ability to deploy those same models in a context that you manage and control, where you control the data. And that's a very important distinction. Jumping a little bit deeper into what these are, GPT, you're probably well aware. If you watch South Park, you know exactly what that is. And you've got this all over the news, right? So you've heard of that. Codex is very similar in that it's actually for responding with code and both decomposing and providing code, which is how I get by never having been a developer. I use Codex all the time. And then DAL-E is for image generation. So that's what's gotten a lot of news as well lately, right? And so we've got these different kind of three primary regions in which there's a lot of interest. Now, you may ask, well, why is this stuff all being built? Well, because there's kind of an expectation that in this day of AI, apps should be intelligent. And those of us that have been around IT and education for a while know that it's kind of the consumer tail wagging the dog here. We are struggling to keep up with the expectations that our folks have from the consumer world. And this stuff, if obviously, if you've participated in social networks at all, you know that this stuff is everywhere and it's powerful. And it's an expected feature of what your constituents expect, right? And, this OpenAI service folds into a greater set of Azure artificial intelligence services that have been around for several years. And so I want to make sure that clarify that all this ChatGPT focus and all of this latest iterations are really folding into an AI infrastructure that has existed in Azure for a long time. One major difference between walking up to OpenAI.com or anybody else's ChatGPT scenario is with Azure, your data is your data, and it's stored in your Azure subscription. Your data is not used to fine-tune and train models that are used by other customers. So if you fine-tune your model or you expose your model to your data, it is not used for another customer. And obviously, Azure is a very compliant, highly compliant public cloud. And so you've got attestations for compliance with things like HIPAA, which are very, very important when you're going to apply these to many of your research institutions, et cetera. So I just want to point out that so you may be wondering, what's the difference between what I can walk up to and play with at OpenAI.com versus paying Microsoft for Azure OpenAI? Well, this is a very fundamental difference, right? And so it's important to note that. The other thing that I think is really powerful is that we have a strong set of ethics that we follow, and we actually follow even when we're interacting with our customers. And to give you an idea of how far that goes, because this is a new area for many of you as well as us, not everybody here on this call is a AI scientist, I assume. And so as we grow and develop in this world, we might need some help. And what I thought was amazing is this essentially report card that you can have in cognitive services that explains where you might be making some missteps, right? So very, very powerful to say, hey, for example, pay particular attention to this cohort because you may be underrepresenting them in your model. That's pretty powerful, right? When you're kind of learning as you go to have a coach there to guide you. I think that's really, really powerful. So these are the kind of things that are built into the service from Microsoft. And as you see this whole picture of, AI powered services on this call, you all, I'm sure, have been talking about Copilot. I heard some teasing about that. You've got various features that are built into PowerPoint, Office, Microsoft 365 apps that are AI driven productized solutions. The Azure OpenAI service allows you to develop very similar type experiences to enhance your applications and your user experiences in a similar way to the way Microsoft is doing it with Microsoft 365, right? And so think about that, how powerful it is. And that's the area we'll be focusing on in our chat. Now, I'm talking at you about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and all security, and you're probably wondering, well, okay, maybe I want to do some things with this, but how do I get there? Seems like a mountain. Well, the first step is to bring your data estate into the Microsoft Cloud. And you're like, okay, well, that sounds like a marketing term. Well, the thing is, you've already started this. You're probably using Azure Active Directory, which means your identity subjects, both the authorized folks and the users using the applications that are going to be AI powered, are already in Azure Active Directory, most likely. The other thing is you're using Microsoft 365. That's why you're on this call, right? And so you're actually already taking a lot of elements of your identity estate and your data estate and bringing it into the Microsoft Cloud already. Some of you might already be working on some cloud data migrations, right? Data lakes, data warehouse, Synapse deployments, even something as mundane as file shares up in the cloud. That all brings data estate closer to these AI tools. And so the other thing that you might even think is out of scope for this is the big old legacy line of business applications. We have a lot of customers bringing their VMware plants into Azure under Azure VMware Solution, Epic deployments, SAP deployments. When you bring them into the cloud, you can act on them with AI services with very low latency and very high speed. So it's very interesting as all these paths coalesce and we get to where we can take some really cool actions. So just with that, the idea here is you can differentiate your end user experiences and really create powerful AI value adds to existing applications and experiences by using the Microsoft Cloud all up, which includes Microsoft 365, Azure AD, and Azure. So with that, hopefully I save some time to pass to Arnab, and Arnab is going to show you some really cool stuff. Go ahead, Arnab.
Thanks, Manuel. Hey, everyone. Arnab Banerjee. I'm a cloud solution architect. And funnily enough, early this morning, I was talking to another customer in the EBC session about, guess what? Azure OpenAI. So, just really excited to be on the call. I want to thank Heather, everybody else for organizing this community, giving us this opportunity to talk to you all. And, since we get only a few minutes, we were thinking about, hey, what kind of content should we talk about? Because there's so much, right? So we thought it would be useful for folks on the call who are absolutely new to the service. Let's talk about like how do we get started, right? And it's really easy to get started. So we want to walk through that real quick. And then we'll spend about 5 or 7 minutes or so just showing you some examples of how you can interact with it, as well as some scenarios where you can see this Azure OpenAI thing in action, right? So let's get to it. So hopefully you're seeing my screen. The first thing you do, and I'll drop a link in the chat on how you can actually apply for access. This is a little bit different from regular Azure services, meaning that it's a highly gated access because of the unprecedented demand. And we want to make sure that we're vetting those use cases, make sure it aligns with some of those responsible AI principles that Manuel talked about. So you basically, fill out this form. You will need to provide an Azure subscription ID where your Azure OpenAI service will live. You can provide up to 3 here. And make sure when you're providing your email that it's not a personal email, Gmail or Hotmail, but actually your organization email. Once you actually get access to the service, what that really means is you can come into Azure and actually, let me just duplicate this tab real quick. And the first step is you want to provision the Azure OpenAI service. And what that really means is I can search for Azure OpenAI in the portal, and this is the Azure portal where I'm at, and I can create a service, right? So just like any other service in Azure, this lives in a subscription. You select a resource group, and and you select your region. Right now, this is a newer service, so you only see, at least in the US, South Central and East US, where you can provision these services. And you provide the name. So let's say Azure Open AI Demo Public or something like that. And right now there's only one pricing tier, I believe. It's not pulling up for some reason. That's interesting. Maybe that's why. Yeah, I'm not sure why this is not pulling up, but
I think you ran out of quota. You've already created 3 S0s for the subscription.
Yeah, there you go.
You're out of
Okay.
gas.
Perfect. So since I have multiple things going on in my subscription with Azure OpenAI, I am now basically prevented from doing that. But you should not run into that issue, and that's pretty much it. This is all the input you really need to get this up and running. And when I say up and running, once you provision this, essentially what you're looking at is a Azure resource, as you can see, Azure OpenAI. It gives you this personalized endpoint, right? This is actually your institution's endpoint, which your institution members and users can actually interact with. And just like with the public ChatGPT, you provide a prompt, you get back a response, that type of experience, but you can also do that programmatically with the endpoint. The easiest way to get started once the service is provisioned is what we have with what's called the Azure OpenAI Studio. So if I click on Explore, it basically takes me to what we call as the Azure OpenAI Playground, right? So, sorry, I think maybe there's somebody unmuted.
I got the muted.
All right, thank you. So this playground is an interesting place because you don't have to, like Manuel said, we're not all AI experts, and we don't want to have to necessarily go into all of the technical details to just interact with these models. The playground lets you do that because I can come into, for example, these completions area. I can choose one of the models that I've deployed, and I'll show you that in a second. And I have several examples as starters, right? So depending on what use case you want to test with, here's like a various kind of pick your thing deal. So for example, let's pick, hey, I want to extract some entities from a body of text, right? The moment I pick that, here is a sample, and we're saying, hey, can you, from this body of text, can you extract the person name, company name, location, and phone number? And I can click on generate, and it gives me that information back. Think of how useful this could be in a more larger context of, if you have 5 or 6 pages of text, as long as they're within like the token limits of the model, you can basically extract the relevant pieces of information. Maybe in a programmatic context, store that in a database. Let's take a quick look at another example. So another important scenario that I see folks wrestling with is, dealing with like contracts and what's in a 10 or 20 or 30 page contract, right? So what I can do is I can come in here and I can say let me click there, from the following NDA, please extract the following information. So similar use case, but I want to know from this NDA, and this is obviously a short NDA. Normally these could be much longer. I want to know when the contract was signed, who signed the contract, what's the address of the person signing the contract, and what's the fine if I'm found in violation of the contract. And by the way, since I'm using it maybe in a back-end process, I want to answer in JSON format, so I can actually directly take that output from Azure OpenAI and use it in some downstream process. So we'll take a quick look at that. And there you go. It provided me that information, right? We have a lot of like research institutions who deal with a lot of grant information. So think about how useful this could be at scale, where when you get grant funding and you're trying to maintain like a centralized grant management type platform, you can have Azure OpenAI kind of summarize all of this stuff and be able to feed that into your grant management dashboard. The way you get these deployments here is I can come in here and I can create a new deployment. And this is where you get to choose from a list of different models. And without getting too much into the details, this is really where you get to choose, and we have documentation on every model has its kind of USP, what it does best, and there's a price performance kind of trade-off, right? So we have documentation and guidance on normally what you can get out of each of these models. A healthy start is the model that I already showed, the Da Vinci model, right? But I can, easily create another, let's say I can choose another one of these models, and I'll just call it Curie. And there you go. So I have this other model created. I can come back in here and I can try to use a different model because it's cheaper and see if it's going to give me the same answer. Because if it's capable, then maybe I can actually do this much cheaper than using, for example, the Da Vinci model, right? So that's just a really important call out. You can see that it actually did give me the right information. It didn't technically give me the full JSON format because it's kind of missing those curly braces. So here's the Azure OpenAI Playground, right? It's really simple. Once you sign up and you have the resource provision, you can come in here and play with one of these examples. I want to spend just 1 minute showing you another use case before I turn it over to Arindam to look at some low-code scenarios. So one of the things we get asked a lot with customers is we want to also chat with our own private data. So we do have a sample application where you can actually do that. So think of this as, I have some backend PDF documents, say around healthcare benefits and stuff. And we spend a lot of time in support question fielding calls from users about, hey, what's covered in my health plan and what is not covered, what is out of network versus in network. This is not information these models generally would have access to because they're only trained on public data, right? So this is an example of how you can actually do that. So here you can see I'm asking the model a question from a web application that, hey, can you tell me the difference between the Plus plan and the standard health plan, right? What's happening behind the scenes is we have actually extracted information from those PDF documents and built a search index. So the web app is able to take the search query, pull in relevant information from that backend, and then feed that into Azure OpenAI to say, hey, here's the information, now answer the user's question. Another key point here is we can also include like a citation, and this is where it goes into like the verifiability accuracy that, hey, this is where we pulled the information from, and that way, a user can get some confidence that, okay, I kind of get that the model is responding with accuracy. So I want to stop here because I want to give Arindam some time to take you through another use case.
Perfect. Arnab, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me try to share my screen here. Hey. Hello, good afternoon all. My name is Arindam Hajra. I am a cloud solution architect, and what I'm going to show you, it's on the same line what Arnab was mentioning earlier. Not everybody is an AI expert, right? Similarly, not everybody is a developer. So what happens if you are not a developer, but you still want to contribute to your organization with some cool application that can add some business value, right? So in that case, you can use Microsoft's Power Platform, right? Power Platform is Microsoft's low-code solution where anybody, including frontline workers, can go ahead and develop an application and add value to the business. And what I'm going to show you here today is not only the Power Platform, we are going to show the integration of Power Platform with Azure OpenAI. So if you can see my screen quickly, let me just try to make it a little bit smaller, not larger, yeah. Okay, so this is a very small Power Platform, Power Apps Canvas app. And in this app, what I'm trying to do, I'm creating a blog library. So what it does, we see different blogs coming up in different platform. Microsoft creates so many blogs, right? So many blogs on different things. And I would like to make a library of all the different blogs. How am I going to do that? I'm not going to read this whole blog. With the power of OpenAI, I'm going to provide the URL of that blog, And I'll ask this particular app to go ahead and use Azure OpenAI to summarize that blog for me, find out who was the writer, when this blog was published, and what category of this blog, and then submit those or store those in a particular SharePoint list. And how am I doing it? It's just with a simple Power Platform, Power Apps, Canvas app, and a Power Automate flow. In this flow, the most important thing that I'm doing here is I'm making a call to the Azure OpenAI completion endpoint, which Arnav was showing earlier. It's the same endpoint, the Vinci endpoint, and I'm making a call to that endpoint with the URL of that particular blog. And whatever we are getting out of that is a JSON output with all the information that I needed to store in this particular SharePoint list. So now to show you as a demo, let's go and find out what it does with this particular blog. And this is a blog created, or it's written by Microsoft on a couple of days back. And it talks about Microsoft 365 Copilot. So what I'll do, I'll submit this here, this URL. And it's completed. So if you now can refresh that page, and let me just quickly show you here. Yeah, here you go. It took a little bit of time, but if you see what it did, it took that blog, it went through that blog entry, it found all the required information that I needed, and it submitted those entries in a SharePoint list. And this is the output of that blog. This is the link. This came from Microsoft. This was published on a couple of days back, and this is on Microsoft 365. And if you look at the SharePoint list, if you just refresh that, you'll see that entry added here. So this all done with a few clicks. You can create a Power App because it's a low-code platform. You can basically drag and drop all these controls within the canvas, and you can create your app here. And you can use, again, a drag and drop workflow kind of tool where you can just enter all the required things that you needed, and you can come up with an app which actually can be used not only for blog library. Now, if you think you have document, maybe a couple of pages Word or PDF document, you can upload that document and ask Azure OpenAI to read that document, summarize it, and upload it in some form. And then you can create your own doc library as well. With that, I'll stop my demo and hand it over to Minal.
Well, I want to check with you, Heather. I can see clearly we're right up against time. We typically run long on our side of the house. I don't know about you guys. How does that go for you?
We typically do wrap it up. But if you guys are open to, if it's a deck that you are open to sharing, or even pieces of the deck that you're open to sharing, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. We can absolutely share it because we have run out of time. We knew this was going to be a problem. We have run out of time because there's so much cool stuff to show. Certainly, there are links to the recorded sessions that we did. We actually have spent, recorded time is about 4.5 hours, including some really cool Q&A over those 2 sessions we did that were deep diving. And so if you want to know more about it, there's a whole lot more that's available to you in the recordings. But I guess I want to make sure that we David, I want to make sure we get a chance to just quickly go through the parting, steps here for actually getting through next steps, right? So, David, I don't know if you're there, if you want to grab it. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just want to share with anyone that's interested in deploying Azure OpenAI. You have a project, you want help from our technical enablement team. We have our fast track program. You can see here, working with engineers, helping you scope, helping you design, helping you implement Azure OpenAI in your organization. They will work with you. Again, from a scoping planning perspective, all the way to deployment. They are not hands-on, but they will work over the shoulder, helping you deploy these solutions. And last thing I want to just mention is, again, kind of like next steps. If whether it's data platform, whether it's cloud economics, whether it's Azure OpenAI, We're going to share this link here with you all. You can click on it. It'll send your account teams. It will share with us from an account team perspective, and we can reach out to you and plan next steps, whether it's fast track, whether it's some other sort of solution. So with that, I don't know if you wanted to wrap up with any last words.
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity. This has been wonderful to cross over, and we look forward to bringing Heather and her team over to the Azure EDU community as well on a Friday soon to cover some awesomeness on the Modern Work side. So thank you all so much for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for being here. We're so happy that we could do this. And yeah, we look forward to working with you guys in the future. Everybody have a fabulous rest of your evening or day, depending on what time zone you're in, because I forget time zones.